Well, greetings, fellow humans. I am back. I asked you lovely people for some questions via YouTube, Patreon, and Instagram, and now have a lovely little collection to try and get through. I'm definitely not going to get through all of them in this Q&A, so I'm saving some of them for the next one. So let me answer some of these burning questions you have. Got to find them. So there are a number of questions that relate to hair colour. There's one from Raven Puff, which is favourite hair colour in the last year. Another from Mambo4176, is there a hair colour I haven't done? And one from Soldiery Theatre, what's my favourite hair dye and colourway? So let's get into it. In terms of favourite hair colour in the last year, I am very much enjoying the lilac lavender situation, partly because it is one of the easiest to maintain unnatural hair colours I've ever had. Having said that, in terms of what hair dye I like and colours I like, I have like 3 go-to non-natural hair dye brands. One is the ever-popular Manic Panic. They've been around for a long time, they know what they're doing, they put out a really good range of colours and they last pretty well. There's another bright hair colour brand in the UK called Directions, and I really liked the greens that they had when I was doing my hair green on a regular basis, so that would be my go-to for a green. I think they have one called Apple Green and one called Spring Green, and I used to like mix those 2 colours, and that's what I used to do my greens when it was green. And then the other one that I've been using more recently is called Adore. I have no idea if you can buy it outside of the UK. It is really cheap. The colours last a really long time. A lot of them fade quite nicely as bright hair colours go in terms of fading, and I quite like the consistency that they are. They're kind of more liquid, so they're easier to mix with conditioner, which is part of the way I'm keeping my purple light purple. I have hair dye that I've mixed into conditioner and I use that whenever I wash my hair. In terms of hair colours I haven't done, I've been through most of them, either intentionally or not. My natural colour is quite dark brown. I've had it light brown, I've had it ginger, I've had it black, I've had it blonde, I've had it yellow, did not suit me. I've had it orange, also didn't suit me. Definitely sussed out from those 2 experiments that I have cool colouring. So like blues, purples and greens definitely work better for me, and like certain reds and certain pinks. So yeah, I've been through most of the colours it's kind of possible to go through in terms of hair, but I guess I haven't done like a true blue in my hair. I've had it kind of aqua greeny turquoise, but I've never had my hair like properly blue, and I've never had my hair bright purple. So maybe those are some good experiments to do, seeing as I know that cooler colours work better on me anyway. One to consider, I think. Next question. Grotesque asks, how am I doing and how did I get into sewing? So, I'm feeling a lot more myself and I'm doing a lot better. In the last couple of months there has been a lot going on. Not necessarily bad stuff going on, just a lot of stuff going on. And YouTube stuff definitely took a back seat while that was happening. One of the things that was quite difficult is there was a UK-wide shortage of the ADHD medications I take. Incredibly frustrating and unsurprisingly really messes with my ability to be productive or do basically anything. So I'm very, very happy that I now have both of my medications back. That is a huge relief and has definitely improved things. In terms of how I got into sewing, well, it's just kind of a thing that people in my family do. So I learned to sew largely because my mother knows how to sew, and it was an activity that we did together when I was growing up. She knows how to sew because her mum knew how to sew, and it was an activity that they did while she was growing up. In fact, there's a letter that I have from my grandmother. This was when me and my mum were living in Canada, so I wrote to my grandma in the UK, and she sent a letter back to me. I was about 7 or 8, I think, and the letter that I got back from her was saying, oh, your mum tells me that you want to start learning to sew. You're about the age that she was when she started wanting to learn to sew. And then my grandma actually included with that letter a couple of pictures because she was talking in the letter she sent me about my mum making quilts and like the North American traditions that exist around quilting. But there's also a really long history in the UK with quilting. So my grandma sent me like printouts of photographs of quilts that she had made when she was younger and a photo of a quilt that was it my great-grandmother or my great-great-grandmother? I can't remember off the top of my head whether it was my great-grandmother or my great-great-grandmother. It was a quilt that she completed in 1941. I think. So I had these wonderful examples of different sewing projects that existed through different generations of my family. In fact, I have a jacket, like a blazer, that my grandmother made as one of her final pieces that she was assessed on for her domestic sciences and home economics degree. And I have dresses that my mother made for herself while she was at university. So something that I would at some point like to do is like a little comparison of like 3 generations of sewing, because I have these beautiful pieces that were made by my mum and my grandma, and it would be really cool to show those off alongside some of the things that I've made. But yeah, how I got into sewing was I started learning because my mum knew how to sew, and that was really cool for me growing up, because it meant that if there was specific items of clothing I wanted, or a specific style that I wanted to create, emulate, whatever, I could just talk to my mum about it and she would go, okay, cool, let's go to the fabric shop and see if we can find zebra print stretch velvet to make you some bell-bottom trousers out of. Why not? We can just do that. So I feel very lucky to have grown up in a family where sewing and making clothing was still like a practiced skill and one that got passed on to me. But that's how I got into sewing initially. Next one. Raven Puff has asked an additional question, which is silliest pet nickname. I assume they mean nicknames for my pets. So, I have 3 cats. Tea Leaf is the oldest, he's 10 years old. Then there is Twig, who is a ridiculous fluffy prima donna, and then Puddle. She was the unplanned one. She was a foster fail. They all have their nicknames. Tea Leaf often gets referred to as Mr. Leaf, or Sir Leaf, if he's being particularly pesky. Twig often gets called Twiglet by Hamish. Puddle has the most ridiculous nicknames. One of her nicknames is Tiny Crimes, because when she was a tiny kitten, she got up to a lot that she shouldn't, and fully knew that it was stuff she wasn't meant to do, and clearly very specifically did it to get a response, because she commits crimes when she's not getting enough attention. So she got referred to as Tiny Crimes because she was doing tiny crimes. She also gets very lovingly referred to as Stink Butt by Hamish, for relatively obvious reasons, I should think. And also her actual name, Puddle, has over time morphed into other things, so she gets called Pud and Pud. Hamish very specifically started calling her Poodle, which then escalated to Poodlele, and we only ever call her Poodlele when she is being particularly cheeky and doing things that she's not meant to. So that's the most ridiculous pet nickname that we have in this house, anyway. Zia from my Patreon asks what my latest research rabbit hole is. So, I have a couple of research rabbit holes at any given point in time, because how deep I feel like going down them varies. I need a range of them, I think, to keep me interested. And at the moment, I'm going down a research rabbit hole about polyester and synthetic fabrics in general, and how they were invented and the science that exists and how they became so popular and so widespread. That's my current little research rabbit hole, and it is so interesting. Did you know that the polymerization science that began the process of synthetic fibers being able to be produced actually began in the Victorian era? I definitely didn't, but I do now, because it's part of the research hole I'm in. I don't know how long it's going to take me to dig my way through this research rabbit hole, because at the other side of it, I would like to put a video out about why all of our clothes are plastic now, but I will get there eventually. That's the goal, anyway. I don't know if it'll take a couple of months, a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of years, because there are definitely video ideas that have been knocking about my head for at least a year and a half, 2 years, if not more, but someday I will dig my way through that research hole and get to the other side of it. That's my current research rabbit hole. Oh, and the other one is utility clothing in the Second World War in the UK. That's another research rabbit hole I'm in, which is also very interesting for a variety of reasons. Do I have a 9-to-5 kind of job? I do not. I never have, because I have never been able to have one. I do not and have never really dealt well with being told what to do if the thing I'm being told to do is foolish or ineffective or unethical or like a whole range of other things. I have never been able to hold down like a proper job, what I think of as a real person job, so I've pretty much just gotten by doing various freelance bits through the years, like some creative things here and there, but also like copywriting and various other bits, because that works a lot better for me, so I've just always figured out other ways of managing. Hope that answers that question well enough. Panna Rose asks, what is the most useful piece of advice I've ever received or can think of off the top of my head? There are a few. I think one that made a significant difference to the trajectory of my life in a positive way. I trained as an actor, I went to theatre school, and partway through the second year of my degree, the head of the course I was on had a conversation with me, relatively drunken conversation, and very specifically expressed his opinion about me as an actor. Took me to the side and kind of conspiratorially whispered, "Snee, I've got to tell you something, Snee." I was like, okay, what's up, Nick? He just went, "Snee, you're a great actor, but you are way too interesting and way too smart to just be an actor." I was like, okay then. I very much enjoyed the course I was on. I'm very glad I finished that degree, but when I stepped out of theatre school into the actual reality of being a jobbing actor, I absolutely understood what he meant and realised that I was going to be pretty creatively unfulfilled if what I spent the rest of my time doing as a performer was like facilitating other people's creative visions coming to fruition. Like, I got my own creative stuff that's buzzing about in my head that I want to get out there. So, yeah. What else is there? I can't remember exactly where it came from. Who told me? Someone that I knew through like artsy stuff, through poetry stuff, because I used to write a lot of poetry and perform spoken word poetry when I lived in Canada. And I think one of the regulars at the cafe that I used to go to perform poetry, that would have poetry nights, a regular attendee, and they were also a poet. They were in their like late 20s, early 30s, I think. And at this point I was like in my mid-teens. And this person took me to the side and had a chat with me, which was super useful. And they basically were like, look, you clearly have a really strong sense of self, have a good handle on who you are already at this age, and you're just going to get clearer on that as you get older. It is so cool that in your mid-teens you are being you and being really unapologetic about being you. There are a lot of people that you're going to meet in your life who will take you being you and being unapologetic about being you to be in some way confronting or challenging or threatening. Do it anyway. And I think they were trying to say that like other people having a problem with me being me is a them problem, not a me problem. But it was a very good piece of advice to get at that point in my life and to carry forward in my life. I think that's just a good piece of advice to get in your life in general. You know, I'm a weirdo. I've always been a weirdo. I get super into the stuff that I'm into and a lot of people don't get it. And that's completely fine. I'm not for everyone. No worries. Not everybody's cup of tea. But one of the things that I love is that as someone who is openly reasonably eccentric, by me just like vibing and being my weird self, I essentially give everybody around me permission to also just vibe and be their weird selves. And I think that is one of the coolest things, whatever that looks like, because everyone's weird is different, right? And that's one of the things that's great about it. But yeah, I think those two things are some of the best pieces of advice I've gotten in my life, to be honest. Next question. Nelly Music asks, what is one of the easiest things to sew by hand for a beginner? The answer to this question kind of depends how you learn best and what kind of creative person you are. Because if you are someone who likes to master technique and like really wants to know that you're gonna do something right and feel good about getting it right, then I would suggest that something like handkerchiefs or placemats or napkins would be a really good place to start with hand sewing, because it gives you a chance to learn some basic stitches and learn how to work with fabric while creating something practical, but that is quite straightforward in terms of shape and form and isn't super stressful, isn't super high stakes, right? If you are that kind of person. If, like me, in order to get the motivation to push through difficult things, you need to be really invested and interested in what you're doing, I would choose a project that you are excited about, because that is the motivation that I need to push through things when they become challenging or difficult or frustrating or I encounter hiccups or whatever. I would still say that something on the smaller side might be a good move, like making some kind of hair bonnet or like a crop top or like little mitts of some description out of some fuzzy fleecy fabric, like something that isn't too big so you're not dedicating yourself to doing this enormous project while you're learning and potentially getting frustrated just with the amount of time it takes, but I would say that choosing a thing that's going to keep you interested and is going to keep you invested, keep you motivated, and keep you going through the frustration is a really good way of learning, if that's how you tend to learn. On that note, Sheila Porter said, I think you've talked about having ADHD before. If I'm remembering wrong, please ignore the question, but if I'm remembering right, do you have any advice for someone who was recently diagnosed as an adult? Are there things you've learned that you wish you knew/understood before? Any tips for finding time, energy, focus, spoons, etc. for creative hobbies, when sometimes it feels like you barely have enough to get through the minimum necessities? A mood. That is a really cool collection of questions. So yes, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed in early 2021 at the age of 28. I am really glad that I got diagnosed. It has made a really dramatic and significant improvement to my life, partly because there are a really large number of things that I've struggled with throughout my life that I thought were just like some kind of fundamental moral failing on my part. I thought everyone was working with the same kind of brain that I've got, and everybody else just seemed to be able to deal with it better, and they were just managing better and had better time management skills. Whereas when I was diagnosed and when I tried medication for the first time, I realized that that is very much not the case, and that a lot of the things that I had been continually and repeatedly beating myself up for and bullying myself for my entire life were not personal failings. That's just how my brain is wired. And no amount of being a dick to myself is going to stop my brain from being wired that way. So I've come up with a lot of different coping mechanisms over the last couple of years, now that I have a better understanding of how my brain works and how ADHD works in general and what that actually is and what it means, but also seeking out resources that offer coping mechanisms is really helpful. Basically, there are loads of people with ADHD who are incredible problem solvers, and a lot of the problems they need to solve in their lives exist because of them having ADHD. They've done the work. They've figured out so many cool ways of dealing with stuff and very happily share that information, generally speaking. So there are some really cool resources out there. I could, however, talk probably for at least half an hour just about ADHD and being a creative person with ADHD and managing, so I might actually make a specific video just about ADHD and how I deal with ADHD as a creative type. If that is something you'd be interested in, please let me know, because I would love to talk about that for half an hour, because I don't feel like I can really do this question justice in the amount of time I would like for it to take up within this video, because there's a lot in that. So much in that. Next questions. Since my last video, what's been the best thing going on in my life, and what's been the most challenging thing? Let's start with the challenging first. The main thing that's been challenging since my last video went out is finding a balance between the various aspects of my life, particularly between caring for myself and caring for other people. There's been quite a bit going on where I've wanted to be available to care for and support the people in my life. My mum moved out of London. A couple of friends have been going through quite tricky situations in their relationships, and there have been a couple of crisis points with that. So as someone who cares very deeply about the people in my life, I've wanted to show up for the people in my life, and that's meant that there have been points where I've gotten close to overextending myself. I've definitely realized that I have a much better handle on like myself, my capacities, my capabilities, my limitations than I did when I was younger, because I have definitely overextended myself multiple times in the past and ended up burning myself out, and I've managed to not do that, which is very cool. But especially when you are someone who cares a lot about people, and when you have a lot of people around you who have stuff going on, it's really, really easy to go into just like deal with crisis mode, do a support mode, and not actually take enough time to look after yourself. Just get to like chill out and experience without like needing to be like switched on and problem solving constantly. So that has been the biggest challenge since my last video came out, but one that I feel I have dealt with quite well. In terms of what has been the best thing, or one of the most exciting things that's been going on in my life, I started dating someone new towards the end of last year, and that relationship has been going really well. For anyone who's been on my channel for a while, I live with my partner Hamish. That is still the case. We are still together. It's one of those consensual non-monogamy situations, one of those fancy polyamory doodads, and that has been the case since the beginning of our relationship, so everything's above board and everyone's quite happy. No need to worry about that. But yeah, I started dating someone new toward the end of last year. It's going really well. Things got quite feelsy quite quickly, partly because neither of us have any chill and neither of us do small talk at all. He has kids from a previous relationship, and just before Christmas I got to meet them, and that went really, really well. They are really cool kids, and I am absolutely delighted that I get to spend time with them and get to be a part of their life and that they get to be a part of my life. It's also really sweet because they are both really excited about the things that I make and about my various projects, and like bought me cool fabric for Christmas and have been doing wonderful pictures of really cool outfits for me to use as inspiration for sewing projects. So you will probably hear me talk about them at various points because I think it would be an absolute riot to use some of their drawings as inspiration for projects. So I think that's the best thing that happened. A lovely new relationship and the entrance of two really awesome tiny humans into my life. I feel very lucky. Want to find one more thing. Now for the last question. There were a couple of versions of this along the lines of, you know, what's your dream project, or what's your white whale project, the thing you want to make but haven't gotten around to, what's the perfect project you would like to do this year. And there was also a comment suggesting, requesting, querying, as it were, whether I was planning on doing any more X but make it goth type videos. Yes, and all of these things line up. Absolutely years ago, I had the idea of doing a chemise à la reine but goth, like the dark version, because I don't wear white and that wouldn't be practical for me. I'm far too messy and far too clumsy, so a black version would be really cool. And my grandmother used to make bobbin lace. One of the presents she gave me as a child was a bobbin lace making kit, if you wanted any clues as to what I was like when I was 9. So I thought it would be really cool to make a chemise à la reine, but in black, goth inspired, with homemade lace, but with like little bats and skull motifs in the lace. I think that would be awesome. It has been in my brain box, buzzing around for years at this point. I've bought most of the supplies. They're in my stash. I've just been waiting. For what? I don't know. But I think this is finally the year because, well, just because I want it, to be honest. Like, I just want to be able to flounce around in that in the summer and do my little weird gothy thing. That would make me happy. I will probably need to make at least one video about just making the lace, if I am going to make the lace myself, which might be a bit mad, but when has that ever stopped me before? So yeah, chemise à la goth, that is one of the things on my make list. That is my white whale project. That is my I would love to do it but have never gotten around to it, don't know if I ever will. I will, and I'm gonna do it this year. I'm absolutely determined. Maybe. Hold me to that. Demand it. Whenever I show up with my videos, demand the chemise à la goth, and it'll make me feel like it is so essential I must do it, because I gotta do it at some point. It's gotta come out of my brain box and into reality eventually. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the Q&A. There were like at least 10 to 15 more questions that I didn't get around to, but I don't want this video to be too long, so I will keep those questions for a rainy day. I had a lovely time reading these questions and answering them. I really appreciate you taking the time to ask, those of you who did. I hope it was nice to get a bit more of an insight as to who I am and what I am like and what my life is like outside of my weird little YouTube channel. I hope everything is okay in your world, and I will see you all next time for the return to Sewing in History shenanigans. Look after yourselves, and so long.